Gary Hoover is a national treasure. He has started
My mom thinks so.
He has started a couple of companies, like one's called Hoover's, which was bought by Dun & Bradstreet. It's about a $100 million company. He maintains a director of companies.
Company profiles.
And then Bookstop, another company that Gary started, we got bought by Barnes & Noble, and it began the book superstore idea from Barnes & Noble, and a bunch of others. Gary also teaches, like a school teaching entrepreneurship.
Hoover Academy.
Which you can register for. But tonight he's going to talk to us about three things, which I've listed there in white. So Gary, take it away, please.
Great, thanks, Bob. Well, it's great to be here. I've heard so many good things about this class from all over the place. And I recognize some faces. I know most of the mentors and students. So it's great to see you. Did everybody get one of my business cards? Everybody got one? Okay, you need more. And one of the things I tell all my students, I was the entrepreneur in residence at the McCombs Business School like 2 years ago. I was the first one they had, and now they have a new one every year. And there I found out I really love teaching and everything. And I tell my students one thing you get from me is free lifetime 24/7 email support. So if you got any questions or follow-up or things we don't get to in our discussion today, just email me. I answer all my own emails as quickly as I can. But when I say free lifetime support, I mean my lifetime, not your lifetime. I'm not coming back from the grave to answer your questions. I don't think. I might give it a try if they're good questions. Anyhow, so what I thought I'd talk about tonight is, what is entrepreneurship, how we learn, building a great enterprise, which props I want to use here. The what is entrepreneurship, that really came about. So I'm sitting there, they gave me an office over at McCombs, and they didn't really know what they wanted. They just said, oh, entrepreneur residence, sounds like a good idea, and here's a budget for it. And they threw me in an office, so we put up signs all over campus saying, if you've got an idea for a new business, go see Gary Hoover. And I met with 200 students or student teams, one-on-one for about an hour each over that one academic year period. About half were from the business school, a big number of people from computer science and engineering, but liberal arts all over the place, petroleum engineering, they came in. And about half were graduate students and about half were undergraduates. So very diverse, and every type of business. And my life, I'll talk more about it, has been about business. I keep a list of business ideas. It's now up to about 198 ideas. I've kept it since I was probably 12 years old. This is tablet number 187 here. In fact, I just spoke to another class across the hall. I'm on the advisory board of the information school that has much of this building. And we came up, the teacher of that and I came up with idea number 198 or whatever it's up to. But sitting there in that room over at McCombs, people come to see me and I got this business idea, or I need to meet with you. And they come into the office and I'd say, well, why do you want to see me, Why do you want to be an entrepreneur? And it was not unknown that the person would come in and say, oh, I want to get rich. And I'd say, well, you've come to the wrong office. You need to go down the hall somewhere. Because, people that think that way tend to be looking for an easy solution or an algorithm or I majored in economics, an input-output model. So if I do A and I do B and I do C, D will happen. And that ain't entrepreneurship, It doesn't work that way. And really, if that's really the way your mind works, not that any of these things are easy, but, if you sat there right now and said, I want to be a millionaire in 10 years, well, and you want to do A, B, and C, and D happens, well, then go set your goal. As an example, I'm going to become more knowledgeable about residential real estate in Lakeway than anybody else in Austin. If you sat down right now and you made that your 10-year goal, and you really achieved it, now you're still going to have to work hard, you're going to have to enjoy it and everything, but if you did that, then you are going to, you're going to own one of those great big houses, and you're going to make, they're paying 6% on a house, whether it's $1 million house or a $100,000 house, so you might as well be out in Lakeway, whatever. Or even go to law school, or med school, and I'm not saying those things are easy. I have a lot of doctors and lawyers friends. But still, if you want the formula, then go to law school, get good grades, work your butt off, get on with a big law firm, practice the right kind of law, deal law or whatever, work with the VCs and stuff, and you're going to retire a millionaire or a multi-millionaire well before you retire. Entrepreneurship isn't like that. And The obsession with money. I was just speaking, I was in Portugal. I went over for UT and spoke at 4 universities there, trying to teach entrepreneurship, and there everybody was obsessed with it's hard to raise capital. And I'm like, well, you know, that's not as important as it was 20 years ago. I mean, I'm in a group here in Austin called Bootstrap, austin.org. I believe it's the most powerful entrepreneur support group I've ever been involved with. There's 1,500 of us in there, and the vast majority of them are going to create businesses without outside capital. Now, if you get to a certain size, you're going to need capital, and certain industries require capital, but there's so many more cheap and free tools than there used to be. So the whole focus on money is kind of misdirected, and I'm not saying it isn't important. And in fact, right now my little Hoover Academy is the first business I bootstrapped. I raised about $40 million from my 4 startups. So they all took capital. Building retail chains, they're kind of hard to bootstrap, especially if you're going to have big stores and with a lot of inventory. So there's a time and a place for money, but it's not the essence of entrepreneurship. So those people, I had to change their mind, or they gave up on me. I almost never give up on somebody else if I can help it. The other thing that would happen is people would come in, where I put my cell phone, it's just back in my pocket, little droid guy, and they'd come in with their gadget, looks like she's there, or their technological idea. They would be technologists, technology-oriented, and they would come in and say, well, I got this great invention, and I can't show it to you until you sign an NDA, because when people see it, it's going to change the world, and people are going to love it. But it is the greatest thing, and it's the whole future, and they're obsessed with their technology. It is not about technology. Technology is, it's too strong to say it's irrelevant. But let's take a story. Mainframe computer was developed by a company called Univac, and had 2 guys, Eckert and Watson, in Philadelphia. They were bought by a big office machine company, Remington Rand. Anyway, they owned the market. They sold 2/3 of all the mainframe computers sold in America in the fall of '52, spring of '53, something like that. Everybody could see that the idea of the mainframe computer, data processing was called back then, was going to change the world, become a big deal. Companies were going to buy them. All the high-tech companies of the era got into that business. Some of the giants were General Electric and RCA. And they all got into it, and all of them except one of the companies that got into it were led, or the decisions were made, by pure technologists. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's necessarily what you majored in. It's more a matter of mindset. But what they were saying, all these guys, except for one company, said, we need to build a faster CPU. We need a machine that cranks faster. She says, I come from auto country, General Motors country in Indiana, and a lot of the car guys are like, I need to make a car with a higher horsepower. You know, it's just cool. It's kind of like what we're into. Well, one company called International Business Machines, IBM, was not run by a technologist. It was run by Thomas Watson Sr., who was a salesman and only a salesman. He had learned salesmanship from the greatest salesman in American history, a guy named John Patterson. Patterson really invented modern sales, invented quotas and all that jazz. He had created a company called National Cash Register. And while working there as his sales manager, Watson really learned how to sell. Now, he understood the importance of technology, because even under Watson, and even more so later, IBM built one of the biggest research labs in the world, and they still, last year, generated more patents than any other American company. So he understood the technology, but instead, when he's thinking about the mainframe, the birth of the mainframe, he went out and talked to all his customers and said, what do you need? And not one of them said, we need a faster CPU. Because what they said is, there's the bottleneck that we have is we can't print the answers out fast enough. You know, it was before real time and screens and all that, and they said, you know, the machine crunches all the numbers, and then the printer takes forever. And we need a faster printer. So he went back to his people, and his research people, and said, invent a high-speed printer, a high-speed band printer, big old guy, green and white paper, all that jazz. Within 18 months, IBM had 60% of the mainframe market. It was bigger than all the other competitors combined. They used to refer to it as IBM and the Seven Dwarfs. RCA, GE, who were really technologically much more advanced, ended up giving up, losing money, couldn't compete. And IBM achieved that market share and held it for the next 20 years. And you can make a case, I make a case, it's one of the 3 greatest companies in American history. You really look at what it did for society and the value it created for shareholders and for its customers. Then they had a department looking at the future. It wasn't scientists dreaming about what's the next cool gadget. It was called the Future Demands Department. And And what their job was to estimate what are our customers going to ask us for next year. The thing is, what made IBM the greatest technology company we have yet seen in this country, and that's, I'm a big into history, it's just too early to judge Apple and Google and all those people. Apple's getting old enough, they're getting pretty close there. But still, IBM, if you really look at what it achieved and how many jobs it created and the great stuff it did. Now, it got old and sick because companies follow an arc. They're usually either on the way up or on the way down. Sometimes they're stable, depends on the industry. Like something like toothpaste, you can be more stable longer. Procter & Gamble, founded in 1837, is stronger than it's ever been in its history. But IBM, by the mid-93, I think, had the biggest corporate loss in U.S. history. So, you know, it almost died. And Gerstner and his boys, you know, turning around his successors. And it's amazing what they've done. But it's, you know, it was the world's biggest software company and the world's biggest hardware company. It is neither one today. So it isn't quite like the old IBM. The thing is it's about people, customers, and what are their real needs. Peter Drucker, who I urge you to read, the only book I use in my classes is Peter Drucker's Innovation and Entrepreneurship. He said, you know, most companies are selling what they make as opposed to what customers want to buy. And focusing on those customers, and I believe, you know, if you do those curves, what companies are on their way up and on their way down, my opinion, I've made a lot of speeches for Microsoft, there are a few of them. I think it's post-peak. It's got a long glide ratio, you know. It just was reported to have their lowest market share in global operating systems in 20 years. It's down to 82%. Well, that gives them a long glide path, you know, before they auger in. But it's post-peak. I mean, just as a user, I'm not a user of Internet Explorer anymore. I'm not a user of Outlook anymore. Excel and Word are fine, but they haven't changed in years, and that wasn't really Microsoft to start with. You know, they bought that and kind of moved into that late. Now, I think it's a great company. I have tremendous respect for Gates and everything. It's past its peak. Dell, I love the home team. It's unbelievable what that man and that company have achieved, but the momentum is not upwards. HP, come on. When you sued your last two CEOs, not a healthy sign. You know? They're all fucked up. So the thing is, there's only one, and of those I just talked about, there's only one that's got upward momentum, and that's Apple. And look at Apple. What is Apple about? Do they have truly better technology? Did they invent the MP3 player? I don't know if you remember, there was a great little Singapore company called Creative Labs, Sound Blaster. They made great stuff. And I was into desktop video and desktop music like from day one. I liked Photoshop 1.0, Premiere 1.0, and all that. And, you know, they made great stuff. And you could go into any Best Buy or whatever and find all these MP3 players. And then out of somewhere came the iPod. And it's the same gadget. It's just more human. It's design. It's ease of use. And Steve Jobs and his team's obsession on customers have not only won the day, but I started picking stocks when I was 12 years old. And I'll be 61 in a few weeks. So a long time. I have never seen a quarterly sales or earnings report from a major company as unbelievable as Apple's last report. And that's unlikely to be their last report of that kind of magnitude. I mean, the numbers are truly unbelievable. In fact, I'm talking to my best friend from college, who's a money manager in Silicon Valley, has been for a long time. He used to own a million shares of Google or whatever for his employer. And, you know, my first question is, why is Apple's PE so low? Because at least my students last night in my class, I had them check. I didn't double check, and it looks like its PE is 2 points below the average PE of U.S. stocks. If you look at the S&P PE, it's at 16 and Apple's at 14. That's crazy. I really need to see what he thinks on that one. The thing is, entrepreneurship is not about technology. It's not about money. It's about two things. It's about knowing yourself and knowing your passions and understanding other people and what their needs are and finding that sweet spot where your passions intersect with their needs. It's about human things. And the thing is, the opportunities are absolutely everywhere. That's another thing. I'm sitting there in that room, and the students, and you know, good people, bright people, they come into my office, and they're like, oh, I'm going to create the next Facebook, I'm going to create the next YouTube, whatever. And they're like reaching for the stars, and they trip over the carpet that won't stay stuck down. They try to write something on my whiteboard, which is totally impossible to erase. The lights are blinking. They trip over $400 million business opportunities on the way into the room that they never see, because their eyes are closed to opportunity. And they're everywhere. You know, one of my heroes, James Dyson, the British vacuum cleaner guy, you know, there was not a person on earth that looked him in the eye 20 years ago and said, the way you're going to become rich is to create a better vacuum cleaner. And if he researched the industry and he'd gone and met with Hoover and Eureka and Electrolux and all the big industry dudes, they would have said, well, of course you're not going to create a better vacuum cleaner. We have 200 researchers in that building over there trying to figure out the vacuum cleaner of the future, and if there's one going to be created, we're going to create it, not you, you stupid, you know, single guy, engineer. He had this, you know, he made a wheelbarrow that had a ball that made it easy to swivel, and then he morphed and evolved, and you know, he's a billionaire now. He collects castles. The opportunity. You know, students come in to me, they want to do the next Facebook. I'm like, no, an aging baby, but the big action's in crematoria and funeral homes, you know? That wherever your heart is, there are opportunities. And a lot of it, when we come back to tech, and I know we're technologists in this room, don't be blurred by that, because technology is only of value when it's of service to humanity. You know, it's just like I wrote a book, and then I talk about how crazy it is that on Wall Street, the analysts that cover Amazon are tech analysts. Amazon's not a tech company. Amazon is a mail-order retail company. Now, they're evolving. I got to admit, they've been evolving since the early days. You got to give them credit for that. So who knows where it'll end up, because their cloud activities and stuff, they are maybe becoming tech. But their core business, they're basically what Sears and Roebuck did 30 years ago. They're a mail-order retail company. They just use, instead of using the U.S. mails or using the telephone like 1-800-Flowers, they use the internet. Any idiot would use the latest technology, you know? So to confuse these people, or eBay is not a tech company. eBay is it's a way for people to collect stuff to match up with each other. So really look at what's the essence. And if you look at great companies, how they're going to evolve, the great ones are the ones that really obsess on the customer. And so I guess the main thing I would urge you is, how does what you're doing really make somebody's life better? At the same time that it gives you great personal satisfaction. At my age, I got friends that have like given their life to society, whether working at the Red Cross or whatever, and oh, my whole life has been sacrificed, and I'll lay myself down in the middle of the road to help others. Most of those people that I know are not very happy at my age. I know other people whose entire lives have been about themselves. I got the best looking spouse in town, I've got the best looking boat, the best looking car, the biggest house. Most of those people are not very happy and may not remember all their spouses' names. You know? The people who are really happy are people who have found a way to get great personal satisfaction, which can be financial or other or some blend. Because I'm not saying money. I was a millionaire once and then I lost it all. I would like to be a millionaire again. I loved being a millionaire, you know? So I'm not knocking that. But to get great satisfaction of all types at the same time that you're really making a difference in other people's lives. And that's where the power is. So what I'm going to do is skip, because a definition of entrepreneurship, I believe, is getting great satisfaction from meeting the needs of others, serving others, somehow making the world a better place. And yeah, no, I'll keep this order. So one thing I said, a lot of entrepreneurship is about knowing yourself and understanding, and the main value that I teach in all my courses, the number one thing is curiosity and lifelong learning. The people that really change the world are always asking questions, driving the people around them nuts, and they're interested in everything. I remember I was speaking to an American Marketing Association meeting at Vanderbilt University, and a professor buddy of mine from A&M had asked me to come speak, and we're walking in, and there's, you know, all these names on all these buildings, like a normal campus. And I'm like, well, I wonder who that person is, or something, because they were probably a prominent Nashville business person, an entrepreneur. And I remember the professor, who's a real smart guy, and his research all his life was, well, I don't know and I don't care. You know, he was focused on the speech he was going to make. But that's a dead end, you know. You got to care, and you got to be interested. And a lot of the great people that you can get inspiration from are in grades, you know, in every industry, whether it's technology, because nothing that really matters in business is new. Everything that goes on at Apple, everything that goes on at Microsoft or Yahoo, it's happened before. When we built Hoovers, I was actually an old college buddy of mine who really took it to great success. And he used to go around, because internet advertising was just starting up, and we were in that revenue flow in the early stages. And everybody said, oh, it's taken off, and this is unprecedented, and everything, and never been anything like it. And he would run this chart in his slideshow, and it would show the growth of radio advertising from 1920 to 1930, and then show the curve for the growth of internet advertising, and they look just alike, you know? Not that it's always totally predictable, but my thing, I believe that we learn 5 ways. They are, the first way, I call it study. And I believe a real entrepreneurial thinker does all these things all the time. And the thing is, they're habits, and once you get into them, you won't be able to stop. It's not like you got to work at this stuff. The first way, and when I say study, I'm talking about, think of it as passive learning. To the extent right now we haven't gotten into Q&A or discussion or anything, and I'm lecturing, you're hearing me, right? You watch a TED conference online, you do Wikipedia, Google, go to a real library, which for certain things you might want to do is still important. That's study, anything in the classroom, a traditional classroom. And that's an important part of the way we learn, but it's not the whole way. One of the things I see consistently in everything I look at is you need to use very broad definitions of stuff. So like, I just got, well, it's been a few months, a report on for-profit education in America from a big Wall Street firm. Well, that's a booming industry. The leading player, University of Phoenix, is now the biggest university in America. They have the biggest MBA program. The man who created it is a billionaire. And then you got DeVry and all the other players. However, that whole report is only about classroom education. True education, I can make a case Amazon is at least as important as Harvard in our society. Barnes & Noble, in its glory days, company we sold out to. Borders, when it existed, PBS, National Geographic. It's just like the Wall Street reports on the health industry. They're just reports on pharmaceutical companies and hospital companies. I believe the 2 greatest, if you're going to buy stocks, the 2 best the 2 best health industry stocks you could buy are Walgreens and Whole Foods Market. I'm biased about Whole Foods. Their second store is next door to my first store. I was on their board for 5 years. But my bias is, they were doing $10 million a year when I met them. They did $9 billion last year. They seem to have done okay. The thing is, think broadly about study, and I said think of that as passive, but it can't be passive. To be right, you should be right there, right now, arguing with me in your head. You should be making notes. You should be asking questions. Every book you read, mark it up. You know, whatever it takes. When you watch a DVD or a YouTube video, pause it, you know. I now have a YouTube channel with like 59 videos on it. You can go to the link that's on my card there. All kinds of entrepreneurial stuff. That is an important part of the way we learn, but it's most of the well-educated people I've met in my life got less than 5% of their education from the classroom. John Mackey, he reads 2 hours every morning before he goes to work. He runs a $9 billion company. He is not reading business books. He is understanding how he and his enterprise fit in the bigger world. And he dropped out. He was too busy learning to go to class. He came to UT and he lived in the library. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Larry Ellison, Michael Dell, they don't even have a bachelor's degree. I believe I have a bachelor's degree. I'm really proud. I love the university I went to. So I'm not saying I'm against that, but it's just part of what we do. The second way we learn is through conversation. Most of us learn most of what we know talking to people. So when we go into the discussion period, we'll be in the conversation. One thing I see people tend to want to converse up to the rich, the powerful, the successful, the accomplished, whatever. That's fine. But conversing with everybody. My rule is there's not a person on earth I can't learn something from. It's my job to figure out what. So I flew into Calcutta to speak to the Entrepreneurs Club. The chairman of the club, 35-year-old guy owns a steel mill. I learned a lot talking to him. Amazing guy. But he had his driver pick me up at the airport. I learned so much more from the driver than I did the steel mill guy. Because when I did my research before going into India, I realized, well, probably one of the biggest challenges for India to realize its full potential is they have to close the literacy gap between the men and the women. Their little girls are not in school, their little boys are not in school. Well, when I asked the guy that owns a steel mill at 35, your little girl in school, of course there's little 6-year-old girls in school. I knew that, I kind of expected that. The big question was when I asked the driver, is your little girl in school? And and what's this guy like to work for? We'd open these big, beautiful bookstores, and the venture capitalists say, oh, that's teak wood, it should be mahogany, or whatever. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. Little kid come up, tug on my sleeve and say, Mister, what an idiot designed this store. My mom loves me to look at children's books, but she goes to the cookbooks, and somebody put the cookbooks over there and the children's books over there. What, is anybody using their brain, And the little kid's right. You never know where the answer's going to come from, but it's probably not going to come from where you expect to find it and hear it. And that's what curiosity is all about. So conversation and if you sit on a plane next to me going to Europe and you think you're going to read a novel, you got another thing coming. I got a question for you. Sam Walton theory, suck their brains dry. You know? Third way we learn is observation. This isn't taught in most of the classrooms. Basically, all business economics goes back to demographics, a big, big chunk of it. Peter Drucker says the future that matters is the future that's already here. And he meant those emerging demographic trends. If you go into any reasonably well-run supermarket, I count Whole Foods as kind of a specialty store, but a core supermarket. We're blessed to have one of the 3 best operators in America right here with HEB. You go into their store, even when they're closed, you ought to be able to go in there in 30 minutes and come out and tell me the average age of the people that live in that neighborhood, the income, their ethnicity, and their family size. It's all right there on those shelves. And what, 2 weeks, my class that I teach now, we always go to Martin Creek Mall. And there will be one person or team looking at all the food court tenants and telling me how much revenue do they do in 30 minutes, and then trying to figure out why one did more than the other. Another team will be looking at what kind of cars are parked behind JCPenney, luxury cars or economy cars. Another team, not knowing what the other was doing, is doing the same thing behind Nordstrom's. People shop in these stores all the time and they never have their eyes open. They're never looking at them as a sociological economic force and what you can learn from them. You're surprised when you go in and realize, well, really the lighting in Nordstrom's is not that much different from Sears, whereas the aisle spacing is, or whatever it is. And half of these ideas I have in these tablets I would not have if I had not heard urban conversations in restaurants. And that's one thing. When I work with students, they're all caught in the the iPods, which I got an iPod, I love them. You're not going to hear stuff. You're not going to overhear stuff. You're not going to see all those little things that tell you what the future holds. Observation. Fourth way we learn is experimentation, trial and error. Experience is another word for it. And, you know, I'm on nonprofit boards, and I say, we can't do that, we might fail. The whole idea of entrepreneurship is fail, 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 fail. Fail as much as you can, as fast as you can, learn from it, and move on. Once in a while you get lucky and you do something right, do it again. But be careful even then, because you can do it again and again and find, well, it's no longer the right thing to be doing. And there are some, in my experience, some aspects of entrepreneurship that are almost totally experimentation. Pricing. I can go through Bookstop, Hoover's, Travel Fest, and I was going to start the first chain of for-profit museums. Got half the money raised, couldn't raise the rest. All of those, the whole pricing process is really experimental. Try this, see what works. And I'm actually working, I'm going to start putting my courses on online, and people around the country can subscribe to them. And I got emails, I got a conversation with my buddies tomorrow afternoon, my marketing expert friends, about, well, what do you think? 10 bucks a month, 100 bucks a month, you know, first month free, you know, and all you can do is look at what everybody else does, make a guess, and try it. And pricing isn't the only thing, but in my life, that's been the most vivid example of, it's all about experimentation. The fifth way we learn, the one that gets left out the most, is thinking. So if you do all these other 4 methods of learning, and you get in the habit of doing them, and they aren't sequential, you're doing all of them at the same time, and then you take and you lock yourself in a room by yourself for 3 hours, in my case with whiteboards, or wherever you can think best. I love to go back road driving in the Texas Hill Country. Whatever it is, but no Teams, no other people, no phones, no emails, and you just think, and you just process all the stuff you've learned those other 4 ways. You will be smarter at the end of those 3 hours than you are at the beginning of those 3 hours. You will grow, you will learn. And if you get in those habits, your mind will explode. But one idea I'm going to throw on the side there is just something I like. There's a psychologist at Stanford named Carol Dweck, D-W-E-C-K. And so this is a real smart woman. Whatever, straight A's, gets a PhD, professor at Stanford, child psychologist. And she wrote a book called Mindset. One of my friends at McCombs introduced me to this book. And she said she'd gone all through her life being smart and knowing she was smart and happy she was smart. And then, in her 40s or 50s, she's working with these kids. And she goes to these little kids, and she said, I'm going to give you a test. Do you want the easy test or the hard test? And she said, a lot of the smart kids, the straight A students, say, well, I'll take the easy test. It's safe. I'll get an A. Mom and Dad will still be happy. You know, what cool teacher will be happy. She said, there's another kind of kid that says, well, I'll try the hard test. Let me see how I do. Maybe I'll learn something. And her conclusion that she learned from the kids was that by thinking she was smart, she had put herself into just as bad a box as thinking she was stupid. Because we've all run into people that think they're stupid when maybe they aren't, and that obviously kind of dooms them. You know? Well, her conclusion was thinking you're smart is just as dooming. that the real thing, the people that make a difference in the world are not people who think they're smart or people who think they're stupid. It's people who have confidence in their ability to learn, their ability to evolve and grow. And if I really look at, because I've now, well, I bet you I've seen 10,000 business plans. And one thing over and over is, do you have the confidence in your ability to learn this, or to hire somebody who does know it, or to whatever, but to know that you can move ahead. Because it ain't about where you start, it's about how you change, you know, and more about where you end up. But that ties into the learning thing. So those are some basic ideas I wanted to get through. And I got 40 minutes. Now we're going to have a discussion, Q&A, or interrupt me. I'm interruptible if you're loud and fast. The back of my car. Okay, so let's back up. I will pull one of my props here. So I grew up in the General Motors factory town, Anderson, Indiana. 60,000 people live there. 27,000 work for General Motors. It was life itself. Biggest center for automotive electrical system research and development in the world, invention of the electric car. It was so important. So I'm sitting there in the classroom, and the teachers are talking about strategies, Civil War strategies. This general did this colonel did this. And then which one worked? Oh, that's cool. I love thinking strategies. And then they're talking about President Hoover and FDR and Teddy Roosevelt, whatever, and oh, this president had a good leadership style, this one had a bad leadership style. Why did people follow him? How did they make decisions? And we talked about governors and kings and queens, and I thought, oh, this is all so cool. So, hold it, man. Tell me about General Motors. You know, it's the big deal here in town. And they're like, oh, well, Gary, they make Chevrolet, Pontiac, Buick, Oldsmobile, Cadillac, GMC truck, Frigidaire, refrigeration. I said, no, I know all that. I said, who started it? Why did they start it? Who runs it today? Are they smart people or stupid people? We may at first think anybody who runs a Fortune 500 company is a smart person. Well, history shows that's just not true. They may have high IQs, but to take an AIG, a Crater, Citibank, my first job out of college, wonderful company in the 70s, total fuck up now. You know, the thing is, tell me about these guys. And it turned out to be far more important to Anderson than I ever dreamed, because today there are 0 General Motors employees in Anderson, Indiana. 7 million square feet of empty factory buildings, which GM gave to the city, which is tearing them down as fast as they can. I've tried to save a few. Well, it doesn't make sense to me. Why isn't anybody thinking about GM? This is at least as important to us as the Civil War right now. So I'm in a newsstand with my family. My sister's looking at the horse and dog magazines. My brother's looking at the car and play magazines. I see this, Fortune 500. This is the same issue, but not the exact same copy. The original is in my library. It's falling apart. I live in a library. I live with 55,000 books. A library and a world musical instrument museum upstairs, out towards Dripping Springs. So, and I have almost every Fortune to its beginning in 1930. But I discovered this magazine. I opened it up. The biggest company in the world, 50% bigger than any company on earth, was General Motors. It was the greatest company on earth at that time, and is still, at its glory days, one of the greatest companies in the history of the world. I open it up. They're number 1. There's 500 companies listed here, if I can turn to the page. And then there's them, and there's 499 other companies, most of which I'd never heard of. And these journalists at this magazine clearly were asking the same questions I wanted answered, and perhaps had some answers. And I went running to my parents and said, this is the coolest magazine I've ever seen. You've got to get me a subscription to this magazine with the 500 biggest company list. And they're like, oh, you weird kid. You know, why are you going to do it? You know, why don't you go play basketball like you're supposed to do in Indiana? Or race automobiles if you really got balls. Anyway, the thing is, I got my subscription, and 2 months later I entered 7th grade. I became a business junkie at the age of 12. And when the new, where is she here? For my props. When the new one came out last spring, we'll get another one in May, it was the 49th year in a row that I grabbed this out of the mailbox and ran to my room, went down through all 500 companies. Who's up, who's down. If you go to my video blog, you see one post called Profitable Giants, where I talk about what are the 20 most profitable big companies in America. And it'll surprise you. Yeah, there are high-tech companies in there. There is no company that's performing at the level of Microsoft. It stands alone, far more profitable than ExxonMobil. Now, since then, Apple's results have catapulted it to the top. But there's a grocery store chain, a low-profit margin grocery store chain that's among the 8 most profitable companies in America. When I say profitability, I mean return on capital, return on investment, which is all that matters. because it ain't about profit as a percent of sales. You can sell a pill that costs $1 to make for $1,000 and still lose your ass because you put $1 billion into development. On the other hand, if I run a good grocery store, the one that's so profitable is called Publix there in Florida, I can make a lot more money than as much money as I can in high tech. And Coca-Cola's right up there. Anyhow, my thing is I became obsessed with big business. Later I got interested also in nonprofits, and then later into startups. And fascinating, and what I'm fascinated by are enterprises, which I define as any time you've got a group of people who have a shared vision of the future, who have common goals. And in my book and from all my research, I don't care if it's the Red Cross, it's the University of Texas, if it's the University of Chicago where I went to school, General Motors, Bookstop, Apple, the things that make them succeed or fail are the same things. It's people, it's leadership trying to get people focused. And they're really, if you really, you go to business schools and it's about accounting, marketing, information management. Those are just tools. If you really look at what's most important for leadership, it's sociology and psychology. The leader of any enterprise is going to spend most of their energy hiring, firing, selecting people, motivating people, assessing people. That's your whole life if you're going to be the CEO of anything that gets its size, even small. Come on, go to a mom and pop retail store and see how some of them are wonderfully managed and some of them badly managed. So my thing, and I actually believe of all the corporations I've been involved with, I worked for 3 Fortune 500 companies to 4 startups, have consulted and spoken at zillions. The most successful corporation I've been involved with is the University of Chicago. It was an entrepreneurial academic, a guy named William Rainey Harper. In the 1890s said, I'm going to build one of the world's great universities. He was, 200, 300 years behind Harvard. Got John Rockefeller to put up the capital, venture deal, and they've turned out more Nobel Prize winners among their students and faculty than any other university on earth. And it's just been blessed with outstanding leadership. And in fact, I heard even Stanford's laying off people. Chicago's actually on the hiring spree. Have not laid off a single person in an economy that's much worse than Texas, and they're actually out hiring faculty very aggressively and haven't laid off anybody. But when I asked the chairman of the board of trustees, why is that? When even California and Texas schools are laying off people, he said, because all of us on the board of trustees know we only have one job. Our job is to make sure this place is here in 100 years. That's our only job. Whatever it takes to get that job done, that's why we're here. So it's blessed. But hey, I could go on and on. I think maybe the greatest American company today is a company called UPS. You look at the function they serve in our society. The average truck driver makes $60,000 to $100,000 a year. I was talking to my driver. One of his buddies has 13 kids. All of them have fully paid health insurance to the age of 26. Guys making $100,000 a year, full health insurance for 13 kids. Nobody leaves that company. And yet, when I'm on Amazon Prime, I still buy from bookstores too. Here's my Barnes & Noble bag. But when I'm in Amazon Prime, why is it $3 for them to ship me a book from Seattle? It's amazing. It's magic what they do. And it is the world's biggest transportation company in revenue and the world's biggest transportation company in market value. And yet people don't really talk about it much. There wasn't even a book about UPS until a year or so ago. My obsession with enterprises and what makes great ones and what separates the winners from the losers. And that's what's on the back of my card, my 8 things. So I'm just going to fly through those. Curiosity. So soon after I fell in love with business, I fell in love with retailing. My 8th grade term paper was a life story of a merchant named Marshall Field. He built a great store in Chicago. And I am a big believer in what I call doing your homework. When I dreamed up my retail idea, I spent 7 years studying retailing and then 7 years studying the bookstore business. So 14 years of research before I went out and raised capital or quit my job and all that. Every idea I've had, I spent between 2 and 7 years. I don't know if you have to spend exactly that long, but my goal was always to become the greatest expert I could possibly become in that industry. I didn't want anybody to know any more than I did about it. Now, the reality is, I'm sure I never became the world's greatest expert in any of those industries, but I worked my butt off and came pretty close. And so even when I was a kid, thinking I might want to be a retailer, I went out and I hung out in retail stores. Back then, the big ones were Sears, JCPenney, Kmart, and I go and ask to see the manager. I'm 13 or 14 years old. Say, what do you like about your job? What don't you like about your job? What's the best day you've ever had? What's the worst day you've ever had? What do you look for in a good retailer? What makes her a good one? And I came to the conclusion, with my little tablets, and asking all these questions, I want to be a retailer. And over time, I went to work for great big retail. I worked on Wall Street picking retail retail stocks, then I worked for 2 giant retailers doing mergers and acquisitions, and I really was on a self-education process. Instead of getting an MBA, I spent 2 years seeing what Wall Street looks for in a retailer, 2 years finding out how a buyer in a retail store who picks the goods and sets the advertising, how they think, 2 years looking at mergers and acquisition candidates, 2 years in the real estate arm. I just didn't want anybody to be able to bullshit me about any important aspect of the company. I wanted to come as close as I could to understanding how to do each job in the company and really get my grasp around what's really a very complex, difficult, and intensely competitive field. As I'm going through that, I didn't know what kind of store I want to open. I want to open a retail chain someday. So the first thing I said is, and as a startup entrepreneur, I believe I've got to look 20 to 30 years out into the future. 20, let's say. The thing is, it's going to take you 5 to 10 years to get anything decent up off the ground. Even, I'm pretty sure YouTube, isn't it 7? It's older than you think it is. There aren't many overnight things, you know? And then it's going to have legs. You can't go out and whether you raise venture capital or bootstrap it or whatever, or you want to go public or sell it. You can't say, oh, at year 7 it's going to be hopping and year 8 is broke. No, it's got to have legs, it's got to have a future. So I'm standing there, whatever, 1970s, trying to foresee the 80s and the 90s. First thing I said is, what's going to be the hot retail format? I call it retail technology in the next 20 years. And when I say technology, again, using a broad definition here, I mean any better way of doing things. Milton Friedman, one of my econ teachers, used to say in class, maybe the most impressive technology of the late 20th century is the way that chickens are raised. Now, we don't think of that as high-tech, but it had what Pilgrim's Pride, Tyson, all these guys do, had a global impact on the cost of nutrition and protein. Changed the whole rules. And you know, the hub airline system, that's a technology. Cable television, how it works. The new technology in retailing was called the superstore. Invented in the late 1950s in Washington, D.C. by a man named Charles Lazarus with a store called Toys R Us. What he said is, I'm going to be a specialty store, not a general merchandise store. General merchandise store like Costco or Macy's or Walmart, Sears, carries a little bit of everything. Specialty store, one category, Toys R Us, he picked toys, and in that category I'm going to have a huge store with a big selection and low prices. Well, if you sat in my econ class in the early 70s at the University of Chicago, and they would say, well, that'll never work, because if you're going to carry a big selection of goods, you're going to have to carry the inventory, finance that inventory, and charge higher prices. And to the extent that the United States had specialty stores with huge selections, the vast majority of them charged full price. They didn't discount it, they didn't give anything away. On the other hand, a basic tenet of discount retailing is you carry very few items. The average Costco store does maybe 2.5 times the volume of the average Walmart, and yet the average Costco store carries between 1/10 and 1/20 as many items as a Walmart. So the idea is you cherry pick. You just carry the highest turnover, highest velocity, inventory turnover items. You just take the top sellers. You know, go to Best Buy, they got 40 laptops. Go to Costco, they got 2. So so if you're going to discount, you don't carry much. If you're going to carry a lot, you charge full price. Well, Lazarus came in with Toys R Us, and he was blowing the industry away. Even in big metropolitan areas like Chicago and LA, he was selling 50% of all the toys in the market. Well, I'm going to show you, even today, for Walmart to hit a 50 in a major metro would be crazy. They would be partying hard over in Bentonville. That is like unheard of. And here he was in the 1970s, blowing the doors off, and I said, this superstore technology is too powerful to stay just in toys. It's going to go to other categories. If I bring it to something else, what do I bring it to? Well, again, got to go back to demographics. Who are the people? I looked around, the biggest generation in U.S. history, the baby boom. I'm one of them. Peak birth years 59, 60, 61. So when I'm doing my research mid-70s, they're like 15 for the biggest number. I was ahead of the curve, so I was in my 20s. All I knew is, hey, that's who's going to be controlling U.S. spending the next 20 years. I want to be selling whatever the baby boom buys. So you look at a generation, I don't care if it's Gen X, Gen Y, baby boom, 2 things. One, what are they going to do naturally as they age that just happens? You can look at all of it. People commit crimes and do drugs in their 20s and 30s. They have babies in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. They get married in their 20s and 30s. They move between cities in their late 20s. They vote in their 70s and 80s, not in their 20s. You know, you can look at, so there's certain things they're going to do. And the baby boom is going to, move to apartments, fall in love, get married, have kids, have front yards, have dogs, have station wagons, later minivans. Then there are other things that are not age-related, but are generation-related. And that gets tricky. I can give all kinds of stories about judging and misjudging generation-related. So what was different about the baby boom? What was different was they were the best educated generation in U.S. history. Far more of us finished high school, and even more of us finished college than any group in the history, much more than our parents. And so I thought we'd be lifelong learners and readers, and we want our kids to read. I also felt going to movies is really a thing for teenagers. My parents never went to movies once a year on somebody's birthday. I thought my generation, baby boomers, would go to movies more, and also thought we'd be more into music. You know, being the Woodstock generation, the Stones and Zepp and Beatles and everything. So my list was, I want to do a superstore of, based on those dynamics, auto parts, home improvement, books, records, toys, or sporting goods. And remember, this time, none of those existed except toys. And I'm not a big believer in first mover advantage. Once in a while, but the key is to be best, not to be first. If you can be best and first, I'm all for it. Probably our greatest example of that is Federal Express, where the guy, you know, was first class at Yale, dreamed it up. They all laughed at him. His own relatives laughed at him. And, you know, last year they did $35 billion. He still runs it. I actually believe Fred Smith is the greatest living, active entrepreneur in the United States. Really look at what he's accomplished with FedEx. But he was first and best. You know, Walmart wasn't first at hardly anything. Walmart is not a fundamentally innovative company. Microsoft is not first at anything, really. I mean, if you look at it deeply. And so I would have gone into toys, short story, but he was doing it really well, and he really loved toys. So I'm not going to do that. The biggest superstore ever built turned out to be Home Depot, which came along a little later. I love books. I've been hanging out in bookstores since I was a kid. So I'll do the book superstore. So I spent 7 years studying the bookstore business. I was 6 years out of 7 into researching it when I finally went to the American Booksellers Convention in Atlanta. And they have a workshop on the future of the American bookstore. And I said, that's where they're going to be talking about the coming of the book superstore. It is so obvious. Because when you do 7 years of research or 6 years of research, I knew what it was. And I actually believe that most great entrepreneurs are risk avoiders. We do not do the risky thing. We mitigate and minimize the risk in every possible way. We're not like born gamblers. And I knew, my mom said, why are you going to, you're the youngest vice president of the May Department Stores company, you just got a raise and promotion. How can you leave? I said, look, the May Department Store company is post-peak. It's on its way down. And that whole 400-person department I worked at the headquarters is all gone now, all closed up. I knew she did not have a future, whereas I knew the giant bookstore was going to win. And if I tried to build it and failed, it would be because I failed, not because it was a bad idea. So my confidence was high. And I go to this convention, and I go to the workshop on the future of the bookstore. All they talk about is Costco, its predecessor, a company called Price Club. That's the opposite of the concept of a book superstore. That's the least of my worries. And they talked about Book of the Month Club, 50-year-old historic idea over post-peak. In our seminar, never once they mentioned the coming of the book superstore. And I'm like, what planet are these people on? Have they never been to a Toys R Us? Have they never read a Toys R Us annual report? Because it was a public company, and I still have in my library all the 1970s Toys R Us annual reports where I pulled apart their business model. And to me, it was so obvious, and I couldn't believe. All I could figure out was how I'm just blessed to pick an industry where everybody's fast asleep. Well, my experience now, going into 4 different industries and looking at hundreds of others, basically most of the so-called leaders of most industries got their head in the sand. They are not looking at the future. They are so caught up in their own internal issues. In a discussion, we can talk about why I see cracks in Google. I see them doing things that are indicative of a company that's backward-looking rather than forward-looking. Potential. I mean, that's really going out on a limb. That limb might fall under me real fast, you know, because they got more money than God and everything. The thing is, nobody saw the future coming. No publisher, no book wholesaler. And I couldn't get the venture capitalists because they said, how can you ever compete with B. Dalton and Walden Books, the two giants? They were doing $500,000 to $700,000 per year per store in revenue. I had to do $1 million a year just to break even. And I said, our store will do $1.4 million the first year. And I remember being laughed off of Sand Hill Road, you know. They certainly didn't believe me. And I couldn't raise the money to open a big store in Chicago. I love that city. I ended up, where can I open the store and have the highest potential revenue relative to the cost of opening and operating the store? Short thing, that means a large college town. I couldn't go, what's the best educated town in Texas? Highest education level? College Station. Right. Nobody ever gets that right. No, it's not diluted by all these other people. Bloomington, Indiana, Champaign, Illinois. Those are where you got the highest education levels, which drives book demand, or it's correlated with book demand. No, they're too small to do $1 million bookstore. What's the biggest college town in America? New York, Boston, Chicago, LA, San Francisco. I can't go in there and open a giant store, open 10 stores to do enough advertising. I had to be in a big college town. So I had to go to either Ann Arbor, Madison, Wisconsin, Research Triangle, North Carolina, or Austin, Texas. And I moved here 30 years ago this month. And it was the right town. It had the biggest population, the fastest growth, and the weakest competition. I had lived in Dallas and fallen in love with Texas, and I had, the guy wanted to pick the books, because that's a key thing. What is the essence of your enterprise? What's the heart of it? And in a giant bookstore, all that really matters is the person, the man or woman who picks the books. I mean, that's the guts of it. Mark Cuban, you know, he just did a post about 12 keys to starting successful enterprises. He basically says, figure out what's the most important in the company, hire the best people to do that, and then for all the other jobs, hire second-rate people that you pay half. You know? And he's crazy, but he's not too crazy. He's a pretty interesting guy. Anyway, led me to Austin, and we opened up, we did 1.8 million the first year. Within 6 years, we had 12, within 3 years, we had 12 stores averaging $3 million a store, and then we were coast to coast from Miami to San Diego. All the other guys saying, why aren't you in New York and everything? No, there's no growth there. You know, you want to own the Sun Belt if you're a retailer. Then, and I wouldn't change that much today. Really an arc, Seattle to LA, across to Florida, and then backfill into the Carolinas and Arizona, Nevada, all your secondary growth markets. Thing is, and after because venture capital did come in, HEB financed our growth into Houston, and then the venture capitalists came in into Dallas. The venture capitalists fired me, sold the company when it was 7 years old, made like triple their money in 18 months. And I'm glad who bought it. Barnes & Noble, I think, did a great job with it. The bottom line on all that is all those other booksellers and all the people in the industry were not fundamentally curious. They had their eyes closed. They were not looking at the data. So when I went to create the for-profit museum thing, one of the fastest growing industries in America does $13 billion a year. It's growing faster than NASCAR and pro sports and everything. And yet I meet with the president of the American Museum Association. He said, oh, don't even think about opening a museum. Attendance is down. Donors aren't putting up money. There's already 2 million museums. You've got to be crazy. And when I look at it, I still believe it was the most lucrative, best idea I ever had. And I raised $7 million, need another 6 to finish it. Whole other story. I may still do it. I just had conversations the other day about doing a new version of that idea for Austin, a smaller version, because that one took millions and millions. Bottom line is, be curious, ask questions, learn, have your mind wide open, talk to everybody, use all those learning tools. So a couple quick things. What are you curious about? 2 things on the back of the card there, history and geography. History, I'm really saying 2 things there. One, on history, is watch trends. So like as a retailer, the most important thing to happen to us in the last 70, 80 years is the entry of women into the workforce. America's gone from 20% of women have a daytime job to 60%. And it's back down to like 59 and change now. It peaked in 1999. Well, what that means is people no longer shop Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. They shop nights, they shop weekend, they shop lunch hour. Well, most businesses didn't notice that. The U.S. banking industry hired hundreds of thousands of women and never noticed women had gone to work. There's only one decent bank, TD Commerce Bank out of New Jersey, that's open nights and weekends. The travel agency industry that I dabbled in and lost all my money in, they 62% of the employees are women. The industry never noticed women had gone to work. A long-hour travel agency closed at 2 p.m. Saturday, which is the beginning of the peak of the retail. Retail peaks between 2 and 4 p.m. Saturday. Just crazy, just crazy. A lot of people missed those trends and it cost them fortunes and their companies died. A lot of people saw those trends. Even HEB understood. We've got to be open late, you know, and adapted. And there's important trends in every part of the world, in every country, in every industry, and learning those trends. So as a broad global trend, you're looking for the 2 big ones that are pretty obvious in the U.S., big U.S. trends. One is the aging of the baby boom. We're still here. Clothing makers are doing buttons. Well, it's going to be Velcro time here pretty soon because we're all going to have arthritis. All the signs at the Austin airport, to me it's a new airport, whatever it is, 12, 15 years old. All those signs are going to have to be totally redone at an expense of millions of dollars because they're made for eyes your age and not my age. The signs will tell you where the bathrooms are and the rent-a-car is. They just, nobody was looking at the statistical abstract. That's the book that tells you all the numbers on America. Or the World Almanac. They aren't looking towards the future. And an aging baby boom, and then there's a Latinization of America. Between 2010 and 2050, the U.S. will add under 1 million white non-Hispanics. I think it's like 500,000. In that same time period, the United States, using low immigration estimates from the Census Bureau, will add 74 million Hispanics. This, over your lifetimes as entrepreneurs, is going to become a Latin country. And that's a done deal. You know, nothing's turning that clock back. And behind the Asian American, you know, look around here. And it's a huge factor. And already, Asian Americans, a huge impact in technology and NASDAQ. But how many are members of Congress? How many are governors? How many are anchors on the nightly news? That is all going to change so dramatically in your lives. And in all of that, there's enormous opportunities. In enormous ways, big companies are going to go away. So looking at trends is part of history. Because the other thing is, you've got to connect the dots. In the 1999 dot-com bubble, Wall Street would do reports on Amazon. At that point, Amazon was an online bookstore, you know? And they would say, okay, here's our history and projection chart. Here's sales of books in America this year, 1999. Here's our history, 97 and 98. And here's our projections, 2010, 2020. You can only look as far forward as you look backward. You cannot draw that chart if you don't show 1990 and 1980. Because things follow patterns. I know, black swan, chaos theory, all crap. No, if you focus on trying to predict unpredictable things, you're going to waste a lot of energy. It's fun. No. Most things are either up, or exponentially up, or sine wave, or down. You've got to start with the dots, and you can't look forward till you look. The only way you can even have a clue about 20 years from now is to start with 20 years ago and begin connecting the dots. And then the other thing is, I said earlier, nothing in business that matters is new. There's nothing Steve Jobs did that isn't out of the page of Watson and stuff, or the essence of what they're doing. Even his focus on design was something that Thomas Watson Jr. really got into at IBM. Sam Walton, they ask these academics who's the top retailer in American history, and they always rank Sam first. Sam's one of my heroes. Sam's not even in my top 6. Everything he did, everything they do at Walmart came from the fundamental ideas were invented in a company called the Great Atlantic Pacific Tea Company between 1900 and 1950. The basic ideas of selling stuff cheap and discounting the customer and lowering your margins to get market share. Nothing is new. So learn from history. Whatever industry you're in, if you want to understand the auto industry, study Henry Ford. You know, the American auto industry forgot its own history. All the Toyota executives under Mr. Toyota in the 30s had to read Henry Ford's biography. If you want to study really how to build a great corporation, read Alfred P. Sloan's My Years with General Motors. Bill Gates says if you're only going to read one book about business, that's the book to read. It is the most important business book ever written. And yet the average GM exec doesn't even know the book. And I can assure you, it's still for sale. It's a business classic. So, history, geography. We're in this saying, oh, we're all one click away from each other. Place doesn't matter. Now, those old Fortune magazines, if I flip through that old 1963 issue, all those companies would say where they're based. There we are, Republic Steel, Cleveland, Ohio, right there. You know, you go, and it was like, I measured 85% of them, they told where the company was based. Today, you go through an issue, less than 15% of them say where it's based. Because their marketing people say it's a global world. We're all one click away. Bullshit. The world is smaller, but it makes it more important, not less important, to know where each other come from. We are all born somewhere. We all live somewhere. We all grew up somewhere, and it shapes our lives. Growing up in Indiana, I grew up with 2 things, basketball and auto racing. Well, I can assure you I'm going to watch all those NCAA games, and I can't wait for the IndyCar series to start. I'm looking at F1. I didn't pick any of those things. They will be with me till the day I die. And understand, and yes, understand the other side of the globe. I've been to 41 countries. Go to study China, India, Brazil. Yes, yes, yes. But most often is we fail to look at the place right under our nose. All my real estate development friends in Austin, all they looked at was Leander, Cedar Park, Northwest. No, we built a new airport the other direction. There's a place called Bastrop. It's going to explode. Look at what happened to Dallas when they built their new airport 30 years ago and how it swiveled the entire metropolitan area on its heel. These are patterns that happen over and over again. But no, you know, all these people, they drive up to Dallas all the time. 99% of them couldn't tell you what goes on in Temple. Why does anybody, you drive right through it, you know? Why does anybody live there? Why don't they all leave? No. What's going on there? Where are the opportunities? Where are the potential? Because so often it's right under our noses. So history and geography really blow through. The next on there, I said 8 things. The 4 of them, you need, I believe, a successful enterprise, you have to have a vision or a mission, I use those words interchangeably, that's clear, consistent, serving, and unique. Clarity of vision just means cut the buzzwords, cut the acronyms, cut the jargon. You know, so many of the MBAs at Macomb, so many of them sent me business plans, and I look at them, say, look, I don't have time to read this till you translate it to English. You're talking about B-round financing and C-level executives and your information warehouse and your IT structure. Take your idea and show it to any reasonably bright 6th grader. Take your idea to your grandmother. When you can show it to them, you can show it to me. At least I don't know, we have VCs in the room. I've never met a VC that was pissed off because they could understand what you're saying. And hiding behind all that jargon, it's pointless, and it's incredibly costly to our society. And the more time you spend with lawyers, consultants, academia at large, there are exceptions, as this class I think proves, the more you get sucked into all that nonsense. So be clear. The greatest is Southwest Airlines. Look, we fly one kind of plane. It saves us inventory and spare parts, and all our crews are trained on the same kind of plane. We land them in a hurry, first come, first served. You get peanuts, we tell you a joke, and we take off in a hurry. And it's such a stunningly simple idea that nobody could copy it. All these people tried to copy, none of them pulled it off. Because they, oh, we got to have 3 kinds of planes, or we got to have first class, or whatever. And most great businesses do one thing incredibly well over and over again. And most of the greatest businesses don't do a lot of acquisitions. There are exceptions. Whole Foods bought 30 of its old competitors, and that worked out fine, but that is so rare. But that's a really special company in a lot of ways. Clarity vision. Next thing, consistency. Now, at a startup level, you may dabble around. I guess now the buzzword is pivot points. So you may try this or try that. Armstrong, cork company. They make corks for wine bottles. Somebody must have stepped on the cork and said, well, you know, this is good flooring. And they became the world's largest maker of hard surface flooring. You can find it all through history where they thought they'd go in one direction, they went another. In the early stages, once you find your spot, most great companies do one or a very short list of things incredibly well over and over and over and are continuously improving at it. Boeing said, we're the world's greatest airplane maker, which they were. We're America's, I'm pretty sure they were the #1 exporter, which they were. And then this stupid guy got in charge, and he said, well, we're not a manufacturing company anymore, we're a services company. And we're not a Seattle company anymore, we're a Chicago company, which is just nonsense. They left like 50,000 workers in Seattle and moved 200 headquarters people to Chicago because they got a tax break. Madness. In fact, they said, well, we need to be in the center because we sell all over the world. If you looked at their order book, it was all Asian Airlines. They should have moved to Hawaii, not Chicago, you know? And then they were always a top-flight ethical company. And all of a sudden, they're being investigated by Congress for cheating on contracts. No, and what happened is Airbus became the #1 airliner maker for a little while. Now, if you told me Airbus was going to pass up Boeing, I would have told you you're smoking dope. You know, they lost their way. They got back, and they're on top again under a great new leader, but they cost their shareholders billions of dollars. They cost their employees, cost everybody. They cost American profit. The contrast in case Caterpillar. Peoria, Illinois, every reason in the world to move to Chicago. Easier to hire talent, easier to move in and out of, fly in and out of O'Hare. Every reason to move to Chicago. Maybe they should have been a services company. They said, no. All we understand is big yellow earth-moving equipment and turbines. That's all we know. And if nobody wants them anymore, stick a fork in it, we'll go home. This is what we know. This is what we're all. Look them up. What is it? 8 of the last 10 years, they've been the top performing stock of the Dow Jones, or #2 or whatever. They hired 35,000 more people in the United States last year. That company is like a rocket ship, an old rocket ship. But man, and it's because they understand where their bread is buttered. They understand what matters. They have this clear, consistent vision. So that drives me to the third of the 4, clear, consistent, and serving vision. What is your vision? We at Hoover's, we call the company, say, why do you exist? They say, we exist to make a profit. We exist to set record earnings. We exist to make 15% return on equity. I'm a numbers guy. I think it's a safe bet I've probably done 4 times as many spreadsheets as anybody in the room, maybe more. I love numbers. I just gave a course, How to Understand Financial Statements in 3 hours. I'm a numbers guy. It's not about the numbers. It's one thing where I disagree with Milton Friedman, my old teacher. He said the purpose of a corporation is to make a profit. That's like saying you exist to carry your heart around. You know, yeah, if your heart doesn't work, well then like class is over and, you know, your life is not real good if your heart stops. But, so it is required for your survival, but it's not why you exist. You have some greater purpose. And the same is with your brain and everything else. And the thing is, I believe in profit. And I actually believe every nonprofit has to make a profit. Find me a university, a hospital, a charity that spends more money and takes in year after year, it's going to be gone. Every enterprise, because what profit is the future. Profit is innovation. Only by charging you more than you come to my class, if every penny you give me I have to use on the class materials and the renting the room, I have no money left to experiment with a new class that I might lose money on. I have no money left to try a new product. From Apple, I have no money to try some new innovation. Profit is critical, but it's just as critical for the University of Texas or the University of Chicago as it is for Apple. So I believe in profits, not why we exist. I've said it, I guess, over and over. The only valid reason for the existence of any enterprises is to provide goods and services to people and make the world a better place. And see how fast I can tell this story. See if I can set a record. So I get to Citibank, And then our three biggest holdings, who are institutional investors, old gray-haired Pete Wetzel. I had 20 interviews, I only got one offer. Milton Friedman's class, I don't teach you how to do job interviews. And old Pete Wetzel, and I'm learning how to pick retail stocks. It was great. And our big holdings were JCPenney, Sears Roebuck, and Kmart. Pete comes into my office one day, the boss, and says, well, the bosses have got a budget for us to hire a summer intern, somebody getting their MBA between their 2 years, to come in and look at some segment of retailing which might have a future, or might have little companies in it that later get big enough we can invest in them, because a big institution like that can invest in small capitalization stocks very easily. Or the company will get big and compete with Sears and Penny and Kmart. So Gary, do you think, and this intern will report to you, Gary, so it'll be a chance for you to learn, and it's got to be some segment of retailing that's so small and insignificant, not only is it not worth Pete's time to look at, it's not even worth Gary. I mean, I'd just been there like 6 months, you know, so I was really the beginner, but it's not even worth sending you out. We're going to bring a summer intern in. Gary, do you think we should bring a summer intern in to look at the regional discount store chain industry? 10 or 15 companies, the biggest of them was doing 1/50th of the annual revenue of Sears, the biggest American retailer at that point. And he said, look, there's Coons Big K, More Value, Walmart, FedMart, Caldor, all over the U.S., Pemida, all these little companies. And Gary, do you think we should bring an intern in to look at these in case one of them gets big or something? And he said, go and think about it, get back together a couple days and decide. We get back together 2 days later, the best and the brightest, two people that really knew retailing, especially Pete, two people that really loved retailing. There I was his equal. And we said, no, it's not worth our time to even with a student, an intern, because come on, listen, whatever it is, Bentonville, Arkansas, if they ever go to a big city and try to compete with Sears or Kmart, there'll be blood all over the wall, all those unemployed Walmart people, you know, Kmart stock will be going through the roof. Our boss say, you did, you bought that wall stock, you're out of here. I don't have to tell you we're wrong. I probably don't have to tell you that Walter F. Loeb, the only guy on all of Wall Street who even shook hands with and met with Sam Walton, became independently wealthy and left Morgan Stanley, formed his own company because he was the guy that discovered Walmart on Wall Street. I'd like to think Pete and I were good enough and smart enough that if we sent the intern, they'd come back and say, well, you ought to meet this Walton guy. He's kind of different from everybody else. What did we miss? Because we were so certain there was Walmart. No, nothing. Take everything you read in any business book, business MBA class, what makes for a great company, and make a list of 1973. Walmart at that point was 11 years old, and it was about 1/50th the size of Sears. And it would have been about 100th the size of Sears and Kmart combined. What was in favor of Sears? Put that on the list. What was in favor of Walmart? So go through everything. Which had best management? Most experienced management. Most experienced. Let me use it that way. Sears. Which company had better retail locations? Shopping center locations. Sears. Which company had better brand recognition with the consumer? Sears. Cold Spot, Kenmore, Craftsman Tools. Nobody heard of Old Roy dog food, you know then. Which company had better computers? Sears. Which company had better technology? Sears. They really were just beginning to bring scanning into retailing, and Sears led the way. Which company had better human resources, had better training, had better stock option programs? Sears, Sears, Sears. Which had better distribution center system? Key thing, which company paid less for merchandise? Because I get a kick out of it. They say, oh, you know, say this is an iced tea glass. You know, Walmart goes to the iced tea glass company and says, sell that to us below your cost or we'll burn your plant down or you'll never sell in Bentonville again. Well, I can talk about that because my dad was a glassware salesman. And I assure you, he and all of his competitors were literally sleeping in the aisles outside suburban Detroit, Kmart headquarters in Troy, Michigan, and on Homan Avenue on the west side of Chicago where the Sears buyers were. Because Sears and Kmart were buying glassware by the back then boxcar load, later moved to trucks, literally railroad boxcar loads of ashtrays and dishes and iced tea glasses. Walmart was buying stuff 144 at a time, case lots. It was not even worth calling on them. So in 1973, there wasn't a single item in a Walmart store where Walmart paid less for that item than what Sears and Kmart paid for the same item. Like I say, at that point, Walmart was about 1/100th as big as Sears and Kmart combined. Today, Kmart went bankrupt. They've merged with Sears. Sears and Kmart combined are 1/7 the size of Walmart. So you have a 700-to-1 flip. What is it? Because it ain't. It wasn't real estate. It wasn't the cost of merchandise. It wasn't necessarily IQ. I met the Sears CEO 4 times a year. We were one of their biggest stockholders. What it was Sears took its eye off the customer. Sears built the world's tallest building, a real tribute to the customer. They're going up and doing their management retreats at the Four Seasons and tooling around in their jets. They were saying, they had to have been saying in those board meetings, look, we are the world's greatest retailer, which was true at that moment. We're the world's biggest, most profitable, highest return on investment, the most number of employees. We can do stores in our sleep. We don't have to worry about that. We can go off into real estate, buy Coldwell Banker. We can go off into investment banking, buy Dean Witter. We can run stores in our sleep. We don't have to worry about it. Read Sam Walton's book, Made in America. That man was obsessed with how does every decision affect my average customer. When they went to buy a new accounting system, he'd say, okay, this new accounting system, the accountants love it, the outside auditors love it, but we've got a woman, a single mom with 2 screaming kids in a store in Little Rock, 10 minutes before closing, she's buying 2 pairs of socks, she's going to save $1, use that dollar to buy gasoline to take those kids to school tomorrow. How does this accounting system going to affect her life? Every decision they made. And his book actually talks it, because today Walmart's famous for having the most advanced computer systems. And in his book, he says if it would have been up to him, he would have stopped all of those, because he fought so hard against it. If it doesn't pay off for the customers, we shouldn't do it. And in the book, he says he's glad that his systems people worked hard and convinced him and changed his mind to put in those systems. But the thing is, and I'll tell you, and we can talk about Walmart, whether it's a great company still or not and everything, I still believe in the company. But that company at $400 billion in sales, the world's biggest company, has less hubris and arrogance than General Motors did when it hit $4 billion. They sooner or later will lose their edge. Nobody stays in retailing and top. It's just a matter of time. But it's up to them whether it's 40 years or 5 years, you know. Sooner or later they will become arrogant and believe in themselves. But I'm sure, because I actually like Target better in a lot of ways. And right now I'm really hot on JCPenney, because the guy that built the Apple stores just moved over to run JCPenney. But I can assure you the people that run Target are occasionally in Walmart, whereas the people that run Walmart are in Target all the time. I can tell it. I'm in both stores all the time, and I'm looking. And Walmart, it comes back to learning. Walmart is a learning organization. Every time I go in a new Walmart, they are experimenting. They're trying different lights, different flooring, do it a little different with the Hallmark cards, move the socks and the underwear over here. They are trying things every second of every day. And when something works, then you see it in 3,000 stores in another year or two. And when it doesn't work, you never see it again. That is just, that's not like General Motors, you know? That's not like Dell. It's all about serving people and how do you make their lives better. And the fourth thing, great enterprises have a unique vision. You can't stand in the same place as somebody else. Truly great enterprises are eccentric. Whole Foods board. Okay, crazy John Mackey. He'd come in, he'd say, okay, you know, well, I'm going to put the pay of everybody in the company up on the wall once a year. And we say, you know, most companies you get fired if you tell somebody else what you get paid, you know, or if you really let the list out. Oh, no, it's part of openness, you know, it's part of my love and touchy-feely for the whole world. You know, and employees at Whole Foods can fire each other without telling their bosses. They can hire people without telling their bosses. Because when I work in a unit, like the produce department in a store, they're paid, the group, maybe 6 people gets, is preset at the beginning of the year. It's X dollar base plus X% of sales plus X% of gross profits. And if you got 6 people working and they never see their families, they're working too hard, they can add a person 7 and they might make more money. Or if they got a gold brick that never shows up or sits on the john all day, they can get rid of them and split the money 5 ways. And it's just bizarre. It's just bizarre, but it's Whole Foods and it works. Bizarre Voice, one of my favorite Austin companies. Brett Hurt, one of our great local entrepreneurs. They have no vacation policy. He says, how can I tell you how much time you should take off? I can't judge that. You know, whether you take off 3 weeks a year or 8 weeks a year, I can't tell you. I thought at first it was his excuse to make everybody work around the clock. He probably never takes a vacation. No, he blogs about his great vacations all over the world 6 weeks a year. They have to clear your head. Great enterprises march to their own drummer, and it usually reflects the vision of the founder or the founding team or whatever. So clear, consistent serving, and unique, the 8-point, fat, short, and sweet passion. And what more can I say? I think most of the stories I talk about say passion. I try to live by that rule. If you don't love it, you are not going to have a home run. One of the teams at business school came to see me. I read their business plan the night before, and I'm sitting there talking to them. There are 3 of them in my office, and they're passing up, taking corporate jobs. They're really going to do this startup. And I'm like, well, why are you in this business? Why did you pick this business? And I'm not getting the answers I wanted to hear. And I looked them in the eye, and I said, look, I'm trying to find out, are you passionate about it? I said, because this business plan has no passion in it. These are beautiful spreadsheets, and there's no heart in this thing. And if there's no heart, it ain't happening. And oh boy, did they look at each other sheepishly and everything. Well, I ran into the founder at 6 in Congress. They got their own office now in the Scarborough building, and they're cooking. And I pray that they have got deep passion, and hopefully my message got to them. You gotta love it. It is just too friggin' hard if you don't. And that means, in only 5 minutes over, I did blow through those 8 points. So I'm going to take a Dr. Pepper, and then we got 25 minutes for questions. Does that work? Yes?
Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
I love Borders, and I was in a Barnes and Noble. It was relieved to see there's still one here. And
There's 6 or 7 here.
yeah, I mean they've been closing around. So
Barnes and Noble has?
yeah,
Really?
they closed one in DC.
Where in DC?
Right in Georgetown.
Really? Barnes and Noble. They didn't open a new one? I hadn't heard of them closing any stores. Go ahead.
So I'm just curious if you had actually gotten involved in
yes.
running things,
Uh-huh.
how would you take
I have a
it?
business plan that I'm thinking about sending to the manager down at Barnes and Noble. First of all, I always want to back up to what's the big story, not the detailed one. The big story, I have a rough way of saying the entire history of the world economy is we had the commercial revolution, starting with the Medici and all that, the Renaissance Europe, and that's where we came up with checks and double entry bookkeeping and everything. And then if you want, you can call them one or two separate ones. We had a steam age, an electric age, and I believe the next big thing, we're in the age of digitization. And it's basically, we're taking everything in our lives and turning it into a file. We already do anything that's visual, movies and pictures, and we do words and text and music, and soon enough we'll do smell. You know, people are working on that and everything. All the senses, turn it into zeros and ones. That especially in the media industry, just totally turns it all on our head. So yeah, Borders is gone. Barnes & Noble has big issues. They are not, I don't think, fundamentally as big as the newspaper industry's issues, and the movie industry and the music industry. Come on, the record stores are already gone. So it's this big thing that especially hits media. And that's real interesting because media is so important to our lives. So it's a tough situation. My little plan for what they might do, and it would just be to experiment, they have 2 biggest stores. They're going to have to shrink them in size. They're in much stronger shape than Borders. Borders, that's a sad story. They sold out to the wrong people, and we were luckier. We got a better owner. My little business plan, I'm not guaranteed to work, would be to turn them into education centers. The thing is, look at what your strengths are, the old SWOT analysis and all that jazz. So what's Barnes & Noble got going for it? It has every affluent, educated American knows where they are, and it's probably in there, and especially the high school kids. I mean, it is the home to, you go out to the Westlake store, Big Case and 360, it's just one whole part of that store. There's no books in it because they've shrunk their inventory to adjust to declining sales, but it's like 40 tutors and 40 students. Well, I want to go back in and say, well, you're getting it free now. Well, I'm going to dress it up, make it super cool, free Wi-Fi, and instead of free, it's going to be on whatever you charge the student. I'll take 20% of that. And if you order your books through us or our website, or use it on Nook, it'll be free. And I'm going to add screens and project, because hey, I teach these classes, and I was getting free classrooms. I'm not getting free classrooms anymore. I give my courses, I'm up to $75 an hour. One of my friends asked for $150 an hour. There is a shortage of teaching spaces for the booming, whether you're teaching C++ or entrepreneurship or how to do photography or gardening, explosion in lifelong learning. And so Barnes & Noble could become the learning center. That's one shot. You would carry less books, because the idea that they carry the most books of anybody around, that's history. And they don't know about it. Amazon makes them look stupid. They're carrying the top 5,000 books or 20,000, and they are doing the right thing. They've really expanded into teachers, supplies, and tools, into games and puzzles, which are things where Amazon's not very good at, and of course stationery and calendars and pocket calendars and all that. They are smart merchants. They're a very well-run retailer. I mean, because it's all about the details. So that sounds crazy. They have among the cleanest bathrooms in American retail. Being a reader and hanging out in bookstores and getting old, I visit enough of them. That kind of stuff matters. One of the reasons Borders went downhill, they started using cheap 7-Eleven bags. I still use Barnes & Noble bags for lunch. I would have never done that with a Borders bag, right? They just got stupid. They were focused on big strategy things, and they were ignoring the stuff that counts, which is the average person. But it's a very rough position. If you inherited Barnes & Noble tomorrow, I would say sell it. The only one I'd want to own is Half Price Books, because Half Price Books is in the catbird seat. Because there will always be book lovers, and there will always be used books floating around no matter what happens. And there are certain types of books, like big art books used to be $50, now $10. They don't work on Amazon. They need to be on a table and need to jump at you. Half Price really understands that. It's about a $200 million company. run by a woman. Her mom and her mom's boyfriend founded it. Wonderful company. A high margin. Used books are higher margin than new books. They're going to be around a long time. That's the only one that I would want to own. Yes, sir.
I was interested in the narrative you told of the arc of most of these companies.
Yes.
At some point, they get so successful that they're bound to fail.
They get arrogant and ego. Now, it isn't everyone. You know, P&G, 1837, stronger than ever. Coca-Cola is now just taking names and kicking butt, and it's over 100 years old.
So why is that? Why is it?
I believe that the only proven way to build a long-lasting company is in consumer packaged goods. Sell low-priced products, develop a brand, generally things that are somewhat addictive. So Coca-Cola, aspirin, cigarettes, soap, detergent, toothpaste. Now, it's not a guarantee of success because there were like 500 companies doing what P&G did in 1837, and they're all gone. But Colgate was from 1809. P&G is 1837. Unilever's got a fair number of years on it. The big tobacco, Coca-Cola, it's pretty clear you can build if you really love and believe in because you've got to have the management have a priority on sustaining the business. There's a book, Ari DeGeese, who was at Shell, what's it called, The Living Company. And he says, look, you meet with managers and you either realize they're here for the short term or they considered a priority that their company be here in 50 or 100 years. It's an either or. You can tell it. And he goes through, because Shell's one of those companies that wants to be here forever. So it's a guy, the head of P&G, the old one, he ran it. They doubled sales and quadrupled earnings between 2000 and 2010 under A.G. Lafley, one of the best leaders they've had since the 50s. And you know, I asked him, how do you have confidence it'll, because he had gone to sleep before he got there. Its earnings were going down. They fired the CEO, they brought him in. They didn't bring him in from outside. He'd been there 22 years, which is always kind of miraculous. How can a guy be there 22 years and still be innovative and think new? But he did a wonderful job. And he couldn't really answer that very well. I said, you just got to have a lot of faith that the successors, that they believe what you did, that built. And the other thing, though, is a lot of his compensation is only based on how the company does 5 years after it's gone. There's a lag deal. And I believe when we measure executives, like I believe you're going to measure how good Jack Welch was as CEO of GE, we need to look at how it performed the 10 years after he left. You know, or at least 5. Because you are not affecting things the day you get there, and your impact doesn't end. But it's just the nature of consumer packaged goods. There's no tech companies lasting a long time in the broad scale. The best case is probably 3M. That's getting to be a pretty old company in there. IBM is the double life, the second life guy. That's a little different. Retailing, especially still like bookstop. When I started, I said it's going to be 20 to 30 years between birth and the peak of the industry. And then the industry leader will tend to live longer, and the secondary guys start dropping. Just like Circuit City died, Linens and things died against Bed Bath & Beyond, Borders went down against Barnes & Noble, because Barnes & Noble was stronger. But still, especially retailing, just the nature of the beast. Because like, say you sell athletic shoes, your athlete's foot, and let's say athletic footwear goes away, or it falls. Well, you're dead. Of course, it doesn't matter to Walmart, right? If books go away, it doesn't matter to Walmart, even if they sell books, because they have that broad economic base. So general merchandise stores got a 50 to 100 year life. You know, Macy's is 1860s, and it's past its peak, but it probably has a good 40 to 50 years, and maybe more left in it. It's really then up to the manager. So you know, there's a company that's whatever it is, 140 years. So the breadth of your base. And you know, desire management. At the same time, if you're working, you got a company and somebody offers you a huge amount of money, you owe it to your shareholders to say yes. I don't believe it's screwing your shareholders either, so that gets tricky. But you know, I ask questions like, which is going to last longer, Dell or Whole Foods? As far as an independent public company, I would bet on Whole Foods. But a lot of that's really based on just Dell seems, and I hate not saying not good things about the local team. It's amazing what that company's accomplished and that man, but I just don't see any evidence of upward momentum. But I tend to be consumer-oriented, and I know they're in servers and business to business, so I really want to double check. I talk to a lot of businesses, how do you feel about them? But, you know, they're the nature. I'll tell you, though, the mystery is, if you follow all that, big financial services companies should be long-term durable. Citibank was founded in 1810, and they're going to survive just because the federal government keeps bailing them out, which I'm not in favor of. Milton Friedman got me rolling in his grave to bail out those idiots. That's just tragic. That's just stupid people. You know, you look at why did GM go down? We can write a catalog. You know, Japanese competition and this, legacy labor contracts. They had 2.5 retirees for every current worker, and they were paying health insurance for all of them. So even Walmart couldn't withstand that kind of economic pressure. pressure. And they went broke, and they did a lot of mistakes too. They took their eye off the customer. They made great cars under Alfred Sloan. They started focusing on quarterly earnings, and earnings went away. They went to zero. Study Merck, when it was run by a doctor believing in curing diseases, they had record earnings. The new CEO came in and said, my goal is record profits, and ever since then their profits have gone down. So they made a lot of mistakes, but look at the banks. They didn't have any Japanese competition, not serious. They didn't have any legacy labor contracts. They didn't any of the problems the auto industry had, and they collapsed just as loudly and thunderously. They forgot how to make home loans. That's just, look at Enron. The people running Enron were the top of their class at Harvard Business School and Stanford Business School. They did not understand business. They did not have a clue about how to build great lead businesses. So, I'm not knocking those business schools, because there are some of the greats that went through there too. Another question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what are the cracks that you see in Google that you mentioned there?
Here's what it is, and that's just to keep the conversation going. Because it is. It's an amazing company. And what they've achieved in a short amount of time. Although Facebook, man, will make $1 billion profit when you're 7 years old. When they bought Motorola, they're buying Motorola phones. In general, great companies are focused to be off into hardware and their software and they're running email. That tends to weaken you. Now, we come back, we have a separate conversation about Apple because Apple breaks every rule in the book. It's hardware, it's software, it's bricks and mortar retail, and it's online retail with iTunes. But Apple has a common vision that drives it, which is this vision about design and user-friendliness, ease of use. So it does have a common thread, but it really does, you don't want to go create another Apple, right? I mean, it really does break all the rules. It's very difficult what they've done. Google, why do you want to be in manufacturing? They say because we want to control the gadget. That the guy said, see, I have an Android phone, and it isn't very good, and it's made by those Motorola people. My thing is, you could have kept Google's independence and cut a deal with HTC, or done a joint venture with them, because HTC people are much more likely to be forward-looking than the Motorola people. These poor guys are sacked with their history. HTC is, coming up. And then just, I tell you, here's the thing. I get the sense sometimes, and this ties with my own experience with Wall Street and everything. We're sitting here in a room, we're talking about the future. We're running, I don't care, any of the big players. Apple, let's say we're running Google. Well, I'm sitting here saying, I got to watch what Apple does. I got to watch every move they do. Those are the giant pillars of guys to watch. And I got to worry about Microsoft. And maybe Facebook, I don't know. Well, it's a focus on who's ahead today. It's like General Motors was looking at Ford and Chrysler. They weren't looking at Toyota. Sears was looking at Penny's and Kmart. They weren't looking at Walmart. IBM was looking at Control Data and Univac. They weren't looking at Dell. It's big company disease. And you just read the things they're doing and you know their board is like it's a chess game. And I love that. I was in acquisitions and strategic planning for a major department stores company. And that's fun, but you're playing a game with people that are already at the table. And when you say, oh, look what Apple did, we got to react. Look what Microsoft did, we got to react. Those may or may not be the people of the future. And so some of the things Google still strike me as having this limited worldview. And I know they're really smart and everything. They can hire all the brains in the world. But man, having that, it's really special and really different to have people truly with vision. And Jobs had it, and hopefully Cook has it. I hate to say, Walt Disney died. That company is still running on his fumes, man. They've had their ups and downs, but more ups and downs. I just saw they're both attendance and average ticket prices up this year in this recession at the theme parks. They weren't always that strong in recent years, but they're cooking. It's Walt Disney's DNA. And Walmart runs in large part. That humility and curiosity comes straight out of Sam Walton's head, which is amazing how because I talked to Mackie about that at Whole Foods. I said, you're not going to live forever. How are you going to ensure that Whole Foods keeps your vision and your beliefs? I came up at another time. Somebody else asked Herb Keller, what happens if after you leave Southwest Airlines, the board picks somebody that doesn't believe in the basic principles? And Herb said the employees will drive them out within a year. They couldn't survive at Southwest. Well, that's a belief in a strong company. We will see. They're on their second or third CEO. Post him, sometimes I see chinks in the armor. Sometimes I feel pretty good. I'm rooting for them. They're a wonderful company. Ma'am, you had a question?
Yeah, I was reading your bio on Hoover's and I saw...
Don't believe everything you read.
About Travel Fest.
Yes.
What do you think separates? Like, what was the mistake you made?
Well, what my mistake was the airline's mistake. say. We opened up, we did 3 times our projected volume. We were going to do $1 million a year in merchandise, books and luggage and everything, and make about a 40% gross margin. So say 400,000 in gross profit dollars, which is what you use to pay the rent, the payroll and everything. Key number. And then we thought we would do about $3 million a year in ticketing and reservations in travel agency services. And you make about, say, 12% on that, 13, so another 390,000, say. So balanced business, 400,000 each. And that was based on the average travel agency did $1 million. I met with a woman who's a board member of the International Travel Agents Association, an old friend, and had several agencies here in Austin. And she said, look, you're going to be open longer hours, you're going to put the customer first, you're going to do all this revolutionary stuff. She said, I think instead of doing $1 million, like an average travel agency, you might do $3 million. Our location, she said, when they're 5 years old, they get up to $3 million. We get them really well established. So maybe you'll just accelerate that curve. But you know, no travel agent's going to do over $3 million, and not in Austin, Texas. We opened up in Northwest Austin, in the Arboretum area, opened $9 million first year in this travel agency side, triple our projection. So first of all, that moved the whole business more towards tickets and reservations. And then part of my logic was travel agents don't do much for the airlines. They're just order takers, whereas we were true merchants. You walked into our store, there was a big board, and it said, you have 100, 200, 500, or 1,000 to spend, and you want a cultural trip, a ski trip, an adventure trip, just chill out on the beach. And then there was a grid, and it was all our specials for the month. You got $500 to spend, you want to go skiing? Here's this. Everything about our store, customer first. We had a customer come in and said, I went on a cruise, paid you guys $3,000 for a cruise, it was a disaster. I sat there and wrote him a $3,000 check. And that travel agent started to quit over that because they said, we're just the agent. They're supposed to call Carnival. No, as a merchant, I got to stand behind what I sell. You don't go to Macy's and say, your shirt doesn't work, and they say, well, call Aero, you know? And then that was my job to call the cruise ship, and they gave us the $3 grand. Carnival's actually a wonderful company in my experience. We revolutionized things, but the airlines came to what was probably the right conclusion outside of Travel Fest, that they were just spinning their wheels by giving travel agents 10% of every ticket, and they did away with it. They did away with it kind of like overnight. It took $350,000 a year out of our cash flow. We weren't yet profitable. The first store was, but the second and third store weren't yet, and the total company wasn't. We had a company overhead, and it just crushed our ability to raise capital. So I went down the day home equity loans became legal in Texas. I had a big house on Lake Austin, borrowed $300,000, and that covered payroll that day. I moved it right over, and then I ended up borrowing $1 million from friends, and it didn't work. So I ended up narrowly missed personal bankruptcy. I had to sell the house and the boat. Was lucky to find a house with owner financing out in the country, and tried to save it but couldn't. I still love the travel industry. One of the things I'd say in general on all this, the world is 70% services, right? The global GNP is 70% services. 200 years ago we were an agricultural society, now that's 2 or 3%. 100 years ago we were industrial, that's down to mid-20s, whatever, low 20s, I guess. We are becoming globally a service economy, and so the most exciting fields are educational services, health services, financial services, travel services, and nothing's turning that back. And if you hear stuff about, well, services don't pay, well, it's just nonsense. Barack Obama's a service worker, Lady Gaga's a service worker, Shaquille O'Neal is a service worker, you know, but not just those people, every UPS driver, you know, every drywall. If you look at what industries have created the most high-paying jobs in the last 20 years in America, last I looked, it's computer technicians, construction people, truck drivers. You can listen to satellite radio, they're advertising every day, starting pay is 60 to 80 grand, and they can't find people. They're desperate. Still today, in this recession. This is a service economy. So I want to move, and that's why I moved from retail over towards, I want to stay bricks and mortar, because I personally, because of my own passions, have to be in a business where I can look my customers in the eye. I cannot really do a web company. I've got some ideas, and I'm going to dabble with my courses. I much prefer to teach in person, and I much prefer to look at customers and see their reaction. But that was what drove me towards the museum industry. Moving more to services and less products, because that's the way the world going. And I don't, like Bobby Hull, the hockey player, said, I don't care where the puck is now, all I care about is where's it going to be next. Yes, sir.
Okay, so as a lot of things are moving from sort of brick and mortar retail to digital,
We're up to, digital retailing is up in maybe the 8 to 9% of U.S. retail. So it's still about 90% bricks and mortar.
I think that companies who are selling stuff should deal with that because things are, like for example, on a computer you can easily copy files, and that's not something you can do with like a physical object. And I was wondering, how do you think?
Well, we come up with 3D printing. We already are. It's a done deal. It's just when. if I was just going to sell products, I would move towards the end that isn't going to be sold. So, for example, it is unlikely we're going to buy gasoline on the web. It is unlikely we're going to have restaurant meals on the web. Now, we can still sign up and have them delivered and all that. You know, groceries, I mean, it'll move. There'll be more home delivery, but I'll bet you in 75 years the bulk of groceries will still be bought in person. Fresh stuff, frozen stuff on the way home, whatever. On the other hand, airline tickets, stock trades, you know, it's gone. It should be gone. It should be totally gone. And let's face it, you know, books and e-books, music is already gone. So I think there's like a pecking order, because they say, well, Amazon is great because books are the most natural thing to sell online, back when they're selling paper books online. And I said, no, that's not true. Actually, music has less physical content than a book. You can listen to a song and buy it. And that was before iTunes. And then, you know, 1-800-Flowers. There's certain things that really work online, some things that don't. Whole Foods is pretty safe. You know, funeral homes are pretty safe. You know, lots of service, I guess. So, but it's tough and how you fit in it. But then the other thing is, any great merchant, to be a great merchant anytime, you've got to give people a great experience. And that's why this guy is going to JCPenney's understands it. But, you know, Nordstrom's is not going to worry a whole lot. Nordstrom's is just going to create their own trip, you know. Starbucks probably does. Starbucks probably got other issues to worry about. Yes, sir.
So I'm interested, you said you spent 7 years researching retail.
And then 7 doing books.
And 7 more, right?
Yeah, right. I don't know if I move quite that slow now.
Well, that's the key of my question. So
Yeah.
I think you mentioned YouTube.
I teach classes about how to accelerate that process. How to become an expert in an industry and what would take you 3 years, and I'll show you how to do it in 6 months or whatever.
Okay. So
You just move it up. You know, I was working for other companies. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Feel my way out. But no. I got 190 some ideas. There's 2 or 3 that I might actually do. They'd still be a 6 month to 12 month probably. You know, because I really want to have it nailed as much as I can. And I'm a big believer in business plans. I know certain groups those are out these days. I'm a big believer, but you also got to know, like what the general says about the battle plan. The battle plan is how to date the minute the battle starts. So I believe in totally flexible ones, but I still, and when I have my classes, right up to the minute I show up, I make an estimate of how many students are going to show up. I mean, I run models, you know, because you cannot understand the future. You will best understand the future if you take the time to think hard about it and try to estimate it. And then lots of feedback. And I have a big debate with one of my buddies here in Bootstrap about, oh, don't mess with business plans and everything. Just get out and do something. And then actually in software and the web, that's a little easier to do. But the thing is, like, okay, we're going to build, I'll go back to bookstores. That's easy for me. And I have all the people in my company used to do this bookstore. I say, okay, everybody, estimate how much sales you're going to do the first day of that bookstore. And everybody make a guess, and then open, and then I put it on the whiteboard or whatever, and it's okay, you won, you came closest. Well, you do that several cycles, and those people then, they guess right on the money. Because they learn the feedback loop. And then they begin to guess on the head because they realize, oh, I'm always 20% low. Or I underestimate how many books old people will buy, or whatever. So it's only through that estimation, answer, guess, answer, guess, answer. When I do that Barton Creek Mall exercise, part of it is every team has to guess what the results will be of the study they got. They go do a quantitative study, and they come back, and then they have to explain why they were off. So, yes?
I was just curious, do you see labor unions playing into the future? Is something...
Well, you know, it's simple, because they were a big deal. Anderson, Indiana, they owned the town. That's why none of the Japanese makers will go there, because of the UAW overhang. Labor unions are largely history in manufacturing, but they are an incredibly powerful position in public employees, in schools, in city, state, and local governments. And the fact that they can elect their bosses is a troublesome thing. But they are big and powerful there. The UAW ain't coming back. As far as international, you have to look at it, because you know in some countries like Germany, the unions have got to be in the management board and all that. So it varies around the world. And I don't think they're all evil or anything. I mean, they're institutions like anything else. They're part of society. One reason I really think reading Drucker is important, Milton Friedman, I spent time with Milton as an old man in his 90s, and with Peter Drucker, with Stanley Marcus, built Neiman Marcus. 3 guys in their 90s. And Stanley Marcus was my hero because he was the most curious and the most dynamic at 94. But the thing about, unlike Friedman, who's a brilliant economist, deserved his Nobel Prize, Peter Drucker's the one guy, especially among the academic world, that understood business and understood economics and understood demography and above all else understood sociology. He was the one guy that knit it all together. So he had very different opinions about unions than, say, Milton Friedman did. I don't think they're good or bad. They're big institutions that exist. Hey, talk about the curve.
versus listening to the customer himself and just trying to turn that into something?
I think I'm moving towards listening to the customer. No, to know what's best for him, it can get a little tricky. Like Stanley Marcus, he really felt, well, here's the thing, I'll tell you this, the Stanley Marcus story, because they built Neiman Marcus, and it's what in retail we call editing. He would pick what are the greatest patients in Paris, and he'd bring them to Dallas and the U.S. So he was picking. But I'll tell you, his son is a friend of mine who lives here in town, and he's like 65 years old or whatever, so he's not kidding. But he and I talked stories about his dad, and he said, you know, my dad, he'd go into stores every day, and he'd talk to the customers. Now, Sam Walton has a quote, if you don't know the answer, go to the stores, the customers have all the answers. Well, that's true. But what Stanley Marcus did was he would go in, and every other retailer would say, well, what kind of dress do you like? What kind of dress do you like? You know, what colors do you like? No, Stanley Marcus said, what museums did you go to recently? What cities have you been to visit? What was the most exciting? What's the coolest movie you've seen? What novels you read? The key is, if you really care about your customers, really love about your customers, you've got to go deep into their lives. You have to go, I was working with a team of undergraduates in the business school on a competition that L'Oreal, the French cosmetics company, holds, and they got to dream up like a shampoo. And I said, go around and ask 100 people, what kind of shampoo do you use, what do you like, what do you don't like about it, how much do you pay for it, how often do you buy it, where do you buy it, blah, blah, blah. Because all the other shampoo guys are going to ask that. I said, but then you're even with them. The way you're going to be ahead of them is, how many kids do you have, do you commute to work or not, what kind of car do you drive, do you like a sports car, what time do you wash your hair, how do you get it in, do you do it in the shower or not, you know. Only when you go deeper in their lives and ask. And the other thing too, asking a customer, like, you know, if you read Rob Adams' book and everything, I really believe in all that. Go out and talk to 100 customers, find out what they want. I absolutely believe in that. But in the greatest enterprises, the customer doesn't know what they want. Henry Ford, you know, said, if I'd asked the customers what they wanted, they'd say a faster horse, or something like that. So then it becomes a matter of extrapolation. We didn't, in fact, one of the reasons the VCs didn't get involved in one of my business, we do surveys. You go out, we ask a bookstop, would you love a giant bookstore at low prices? Well, a third said, yeah, I think so. A third said, no way. And a third said, well, I don't know. And then I kept their names. And we had the grand opening. We gave them, we said, oh, for instance, survey, we'll give you a discount if we open the store. So I'm standing at the grand opening, taking them, and I'm kind of like, oh, you said you wouldn't like this store. Well, they're like, well, you never told me to have this many books. You never told me they'd be this cheap. Only I could see that vision. I mean, I really believe that true entrepreneurship is almost equally introverted and extroverted. Half of Bookstop was Gary Hoover's highly personal vision of his own dream bookstore. But the other half of my life was talking to every stranger I met. I mean, I won't sign NDAs. I don't ask people to sign NDAs. How many of you got a cure for cancer? Yeah. Or if you're talking to Microsoft, yeah. But I could take my 190 business ideas, write up business plans, and drop them by helicopter over Austin, and never lose a wink of sleep. Because nobody sees my vision. So when you're dreaming up the future, a guy like a Walt Disney or Steve Jobs, you know, I'm pretty sure the stories say he took AT&T, the iPhone, and they said, come on, nobody's ever going to use a touch screen for a phone. It doesn't work. And I actually think they have a point. I find them kind of awkward. So I'm ready for a little dial in, you know. The thing is, no, people didn't believe him. He had his own vision. Nobody was asking him for that. And, you know, their famous Jobs quotes, and he didn't listen to customers. He was on his own trip. At some level, though, he had a deep understanding of what people found cool. And he was heavily customer-driven. Just a little mystical way to do it. I don't know what he said. The thing that would have made Bill Gates better if he dropped acid, you know. So Jobs was on his own trip in every regard. And not always a good one, you know. Not the most ethical businessman in recent history. The stock option plays, and all that. Read the Isaacson biography. So it's tricky. And the bolder your idea, the trickier it is. And so it's like, hey, the reason that Confidence Bookstop will work ultimately is because it worked in toys. And toys and books are similar enough. That was ultimately because I couldn't have proven that the book superstore on its own in a vacuum worked. So a lot of times it's this extrapolation. Or hey, a website that does this over there works. Or a website that does what I want to do in Thailand works, that ought to work in the States. Or well, maybe it won't. It's a different population. So, you know, for the really adventuresome things, a lot of times it's very tricky. One more question? Sure.
So, a lot of people focused on people still buy books because of the thingness, and they said the same thing about CDs, that nobody buys that. So, what I am thinking is that maybe in the future of the retail spot, you've alluded to this, like even if your travel place was an experience, it's this other place kind of concept. I mean, that's why
Sure.
I go tutor at Barnes & Noble,
Right.
is it's a...
And they're already that. A lot of the people in that Barnes & Noble, either been tutored or hanging out at Starbucks.
So how do you, I kind of think, my hunch is that there's a marriage of digital, like I might be able
pretty sure that's what they're talking about at Barnes & Noble right now. You know, the CEO is a Longhorn, and he's from the digital side, and he's driving the Nook thing really hard. And so that's probably what they're saying. Let me take one more. Yes, sir?
What was your first business idea?
Oh, little kid. Gosh, one of my favorites, and most of my ideas I have them, it takes 15 years for everybody to do them, was bottled iced tea. I grew up with iced tea and lemonade as a kid, and you couldn't go to the store and buy them. You know, you had to wait for Mom to make them, and man, the way Mom made iced tea, it took like a day and a half. You know, you set it out on the porch in the sun and all that crap, and her lemonade was out of sight, but it was just as slow. And why do they make iced tea in a bottle? And then the big guys got into it, and they made lousy iced tea. It just tasted awful. And it took them like 20 years. Now they move large, huge quantities, and of course there was an Austin startup, you know, Sweet Leaf, another part of Nestle, and they actually, I didn't realize they bought Tradewinds, a real good operator out of Cincinnati. Man, all kinds of ideas all the time. You know, I got 7 ideas for software, and they can range from giant. What was the one I had the other day? Well, America could use a good cell phone company. I did a blog post about that. The cell phone industry is a basket. It's a disaster. They are all obsessed with price, when in fact price is not. I mean, that's what I call it the Walmart myth. Walmart myth. Price is not what drives Walmart. Walmart has a sister company called Sam's that sells stuff cheaper, and Sam's is a failure. I mean, Sam's has had 17 CEOs in its history. It does about 2/3 the sales per store of a Costco. It's had its head added to it. They would be so much better off if they took that capital and built Walmarts with it. Walmarts are high-priced stores compared to a Sam's. They don't really understand deep discounting. What they understand is the combination of service, convenience, service or lack thereof, convenience, location, where things are arranged in the store, hours, a lot of factors. There are a lot longer hours in the Sam's. So, you know, hey, I've said this to 30 audiences we've tried here. When I speak to business people, I say, look, start a cell phone company, and what we'll say is we'll always tell the customer yes. We'll be Nordstrom or Whole Foods or FedEx in terms of our service level, and we will charge you and more convenient in every way, and we will charge you 15% more than anybody else. And we'll have this. Now, and every time I say to a business audience, everybody agrees, I'd sign up and argue. Whereas, you know, the cell phone companies are all worried about, well, we're $9 a month and $8 a month and $7 a month. They're, oh, we're going to have to charge for data now. It's like the banks. Most of the banks are idiots. That's why the the credit unions are gaining market share just at a dramatic rate because they put the customer first overall as an industry. So, some are big ideas to little, okay, I'm walking around Venture Labs over here. There are offices under the AT&T Center in the basement. Very cool, wonderful thing. And so the idea that one of my tablet out of there is called fakewindows.com. So all I want to do is buy a bunch of flat screen TVs from a cheap supplier in Taiwan or whatever. I want to angle them up like this, and I want to ship them with little cartridges, SD chips, where I can say, okay, I want to sail to Europe, and that'll be out my window. Or I want 4 seasons of the year, or I want a rainy day, or I want a sunny day. And so we sell you the refills, the chips, and then of course it comes with either poly mini blinds or a frame, or I can change the frame. So I'm buying whatever, a $70 flat screen, and I'm reselling it for $71. That doesn't matter. I'm adding $100 for the dressing and $50 for your chip. And it's called fakewindows.com, you know, whatever. So sometimes they're little product things like that. I mean, the thing is, you get in the habit of doing it, and they just shower, you know. I'm thinking about making a challenge where I try to come up with 5 ideas a week for a month. Because they won't go in my book unless I believe they're unique and nobody else is doing them, and I believe there really is something there. But they can range from billion-dollar ideas. Okay, here's my big one. If anybody wants to run with it, you at least got to tell me about it and give me a chance to participate. This is like $1 billion. I think it's the one that would make the most money for the investors. It's called Board Game Casino. So board games are on the rise. The Settlers of Catan and all that jazz coming out of Journey. Monopoly never went away. They still crank them, still sell them with Barnes & Noble. So I want to build a real bricks and mortar casino in Vegas or Macau. It's got to be U.S. because it's about American nostalgia, really. So it's Vegas or Atlantic City. And in that, there's a floor where they play Monopoly, a floor where they play diplomacy, a floor where they play Risk. I think that the big game companies like Parker Brothers are going to say, oh, super, because I'm going to be writing them checks that are bigger than they make all year on those games now, by paying them 4% royalty or whatever. And then I'm going to broadcast and have competitions. And then I always think, any idea I have, I think, what is the block? What is the challenge here? And there, the challenge would be convincing the Nevada Gaming Board to allow me to make it gambling. Because you could figure out how to gamble. Hey, my first week at McCombs, I had 6 ideas on campus. And they're just, none of the students were talking about needs of faculty and students. The UT, the core campus, 40 acres, whatever it is, it's 100,000 daytime population, my estimate. It has no decent internal transportation system. I remember when Dean Gilligan made a speech at Bass Concert Hall. I said, I'd make it over than 10 minutes. No, it's 20 minutes for an old fat guy like me. You know, they have these lumbering buses, but they can't go up Speedway, which is the main drag of the university, because of all the construction. So Green Jitney, I own a URL, dollarride.com. Green Jitney. Jitney is a transportation system, just runs a loop. You just hold your hand up, you get on where you want, get off where you want. It costs $1. It's a green. It plugs in overnight, plug-in electric vehicle. They sell for about $12,000. They seat 12 people. They have no walls. They're a long golf cart with a roof, right? Yeah, golf carts have roofs, right? Anyway, and you just run them up and down and get on, get off wherever you want. So it's for people that are on crutches, people carrying a big load of books, people that are late and when it's raining. It's the core market. I found there's only 2 deals like that anywhere in America. And I think I had a better business model. Well, that was just because I needed it. You know, my parking garage was almost a mile from my office, and I always carried all these friggin' books, you know, and I needed it, and then, well, if I needed it, somebody else needed it. Gotta think hard about that. And then I have yet to meet, I haven't asked you guys, all the time I bring that up, everybody says, oh, I'd use that, you know. And well, I found out there's one entrepreneur, I think at Florida State. He'd gone to Atlanta, made his fortune in real estate, and he'd gone back to Florida State, and he had the same idea, but it was a free service, and he made his money selling advertising on the thing. So it's free. I don't like that business model as well because it's not scalable, to use that term, because if you demand doubles or triples, you have 10 of them running, the advertising fee you're going to get on number 10 is probably not as high as number 1. Whereas at $1 right, I can triple the volume and I triple the revenue, and I can still sell advertising. So I like mine better. And then, of course, you got a pack, it's a card. You just swipe it and get on. That's $100 a year or whatever. But, and the way you find the patterns, you just go out and watch. You count the people going on all the walkways, and they basically run garage to garage. South end to north end, east to west at 2 places. So a system like that and that for starters, from what I observed. Because I would then hang out on Speedway and watch where does everybody go. That's just an example. It's something that I believe any city of 100,000 has an internal transportation system. UT doesn't. I'm not a real one that works. And you know, you get tired of walking up. I don't know. How many of you would ride the dollar ride? That's all it takes. That's all it takes. I'm rich. I'm rich. I'm back on Lake Austin.